And so I'll look it up on Google, which is a pretty cool thing, really. You can just say, go to Google or any search engine and type in the word verse, and then type out the words as, it doesn't even have to be the words of the verse. It could be just like, oh, I remember David was talking about the waters of life, or something like that. You could type that in. Boom, it'll pop up the verse. So then I'll go to that part in the scripture and read it. And inevitably, it raises more questions. It answers some things, but it also brings questions. And so the direction that you can go in that time is, I'm sure most of you know this, but you can seek deeper and deeper and farther out, and then you can carry those thoughts around with you. So that's a really worthy thing to do. I think David did this. So we are in Psalm 7. And so remembering, just bringing us up to pace for where we were last week, David had been slanderously accused by this person named Cush, who was one of Saul's hanger-ons. He was probably a person looking to get a promotion. You know, that's what happened with these people. They would attach themselves to the throne or to the king, to the crown, and then bend over backwards to look good in their eyes, so that maybe at some point they would become identified, well, okay, you can now be my minister of something. So it was ambitious kind of an attitude. I think that's kind of what Cush was, and Cush wasn't the only one. There was a whole bunch of them that did that. But in this psalm, it's Cush, the Benjamite, who then renders these slanderous accusations against David. And he had decided already that he was not only going to accuse David, but he was going to be the judge and the punisher all in one. Judge, jury, and executioner. And so David was aware of this. He knew he was going to be killed. And yet these people, even though their justice was not justice at all, it was based on a lie. Based on a lie. They had the power for them to bring what they had perceived as their own justice and make it prevail against David. They had the power, in other words. And it didn't matter what the truth was, because they had the power. Such was the mentality of the people of Israel, even in David's time. Of course, there were some devoted people too. Some of the people that wrote Psalms, some of the Psalms. We have many of them that are anonymous, and we know that there were people who remembered the ancient ways. They remembered the stories of how God delivered the people out of Egyptian bondage. And they devoted themselves to God. So there were some who did, but there was also a kind of a cancer in the people of Israel. And what's going on here with Saul and Cush and all of these other people was certainly of that particular ilk. They had taken the truth and modified it to their own truth, but they knew it wasn't the truth. They knew it was not the truth. But they said, we will believe this lie. And so they perverted justice. They perverted truth, even though they knew what the truth was. So this already existed during the time of David. Yeah, I think it probably existed before that. When the people came out of Egypt, they were carrying the idols of the Egyptian idols with them. And how quick were they to ask Aaron to throw their jewelry into the fire and make a golden calf, right? And worship that God, not the God that had delivered them, which they knew, but it was a God of their own making. Anyway, in all this accusation and everything, David knows that he's innocent. Well, he knows he's innocent. He has not done the things that they have accused him of. He's not that kind of person. He's not that David. He knows that he's not that. And so he seeks God's justice because he believes that God's justice is a different thing than the justice of the people around Saul and the justice of Cush and other people that are in that group. He appeals to the justice of God, and that's what this psalm really is. It's an appeal to the justice of God. So he knows that God's justice surpasses this made-up justice that's false. So he simply prays, then out of his own integrity. Nobody's there to watch him. Nobody's there to hold him to account of his own integrity. He knows he has integrity, and so he prays out of his integrity and also out of his known trust in God. He prays to this God that he knows from back in shepherd boy days, who helped him defeat the lion and the bear, who helped him as probably a teenager person or something, young man, to slay Goliath. He knows this God because God gave him information somewhere along the way. Because when he stepped in front of Goliath, he said, "Who are you, Goliath, to say things against the holy God of Israel?" All right, this is just a kid that came out of a pasture. How did he know that the words of Goliath were speaking against the holy, something that was holy? He knew what holy was. He had already learned that. So anyway, this was David. And as he grew up and became anointed king, even before he took the throne or even before he took over, before he conquered Jerusalem as a city, even before that, David was a different kind of person. He was not the person of false truth. He was a person of a God that he knew as his own God. It wasn't a question to him. So this is the God that he prays to for refuge in verse 1. And I kind of feel like that if there's nothing else, if David said nothing else in this psalm, verse 1, "O Lord, my God, in you I have taken refuge. I can't do anything about the evil and untruth things that are happening out there. I don't know what all they're planning for me, but I'm pretty sure they're going to kill me. Save me from those who pursue and deliver me." I mean, to me, that's enough. And that becomes the umbrella, I think, for this entire psalm, where then David is fleshing out this idea that God's justice exists and that it is worthy of his attention. And it's something he believes in. He has no question. And it may seem kind of crazy to the people around him, but David knows that the justice of God prevails. Where was the people's devotion to God, to righteousness, and to truth, even in the time of Saul? It was during Saul's reign that the worship of God had waned. I mean, you may remember, it started because during the time of Eli and his sons, when they kind of perverted, especially Eli's sons, perverted justice. And so, as a consequence, they became weak. And the Philistines came in and attacked them at the tabernacle, which was the place where everybody came to worship God, Yahweh. And they took the Ark of the Covenant, which devastated the people. So that kind of set off a chain. And when Saul comes along, he doesn't want to fool with Shiloh anymore. He wants something that's a little more convenient to him. So he sets up a worship place in a place called Nob. And because it was close to his house, close to where he was living, in Gibeah. And he said, okay, you priest, you go over to Nob and you can carry on whatever you do. I don't think he was real devoted to trying to enhance the worship of the people of Israel. He was looking for convenience, I think, perhaps more than anything. So there were these priests at Nob, and Saul, I mean, he seems to be delusional, doesn't he? In some ways, because he was always thinking somebody was out to get him, especially David. He kind of, I think, knew that David was God's anointed and that it was just a matter of time. So he was always trying to protect against his fiefdom, his crown, his throne. Anyway, it was during a time when Saul got the idea that the priests that were there over at Nob were not protecting him. And so he came up there and he killed these 85 people who wore the linen ephod, which is another way of saying he killed all the priests, the Levitical people who were the ones who were probably the most blameless, perhaps. They tended to lend themselves toward the worship of God and that kind of thing. So he had them all killed. Well, we were already kind of on a down slope. We already had a problem of idolatry among the people to begin with. And then the Shiloh went down, and then the Ark of the Covenant was taken away. And then they just dismantled Shiloh and started this other place that was convenient for Saul, and then he killed all of them. I mean, there's a message that Saul has in all this for the people. Worship is not that important. I wanted to put this up here just to give us a context. This is like a timeline. It looks pretty complicated, and I put some extra goop on there. But this is a timeline from David to Isaiah. You notice that you probably can't read it very well, but the little blue angular thing at the top talks about how it's a period of time when David wrote the Psalms and David conquered Jerusalem and all that kind of thing. And it comes down to 1000 BC, about 1000. Now Isaiah comes along in 725. Remember that we're going backwards on the timeline, because the farther you go that way to the right, the closer you are getting to the time of Christ. So it's about 275 years. In the scheme of all eternity, 275 years is not a long time. By the time of Isaiah, this cancer, if you want to call it that had come with the people out of Israel and had been destroyed in the worship places and had been lost to Saul, who was supposed to be watching over the people, had kind of metastasized into a full-grown idolatry among the people of Israel. In just 275 years, it had existed for a long time, but now it's bearing fruit. And this was the verse that we started to read last week. So here we are where in Isaiah 28, God is speaking here through Isaiah to the people of Israel. 275 years later, he says, because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have made a pact. The gushing flood will not reach us when it passes by, because we've made falsehood our refuge. Okay, we're talking about refuge here. David is making God his refuge. But outside of him, people are making other things their refuge. They have made falsehood their refuge. Behold, I'm laying in Zion, still this is God speaking through Isaiah. Behold, I'm laying in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a costly cornerstone, for the foundation firmly placed. He who believes in it will not be disturbed. So God is promising the people that he's still there, his justice prevails. If they turn to him, they will be preserved. Yeah, Jim.
Can we make any parallel comparisons to what happened then with the people as to what happens now? Do we put our faith and trust in things that are temporary and meaningless, but seem really important?
Oh, yeah. We'll get to that. So, again, back to this passage here. By the way, that, behold, I'm laying in Zion a stone, that's dripping with messianic intentionality, right? It's quoted in the New Testament in more than one place. And he says, I will make justice my justice, God's justice. I will make justice. God's justice is the measuring line. And righteousness will be the level thing. These other things are not straight. They are not the real thing. They are delusional. Then when God's justice comes in, he says, then hail will sweep away the refuge of lies. There's a lot of lies among the people. The waters will overflow the secret place. Your covenant with death will be canceled. So the justice of God has the power. I mean, it is the only power. The covenant with death is just fake. And your pact with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, then you'll become its trampling place. As often as it passes through, it will seize you. For morning after morning, it will pass through anytime during the day or night, and it'll be sheer terror to understand what's going on. The bed is too short. You can't stretch out. The blanket is too small. I can't get it up to warm my feet at night. Every single thing of your life will speak to the fact that this fake justice is not real, and my justice is. So my question and Jim's question is this, in the red at the bottom. Is it possible for us to make other things our refuge? Laughable. Lou says it's laughable. That's what we do. I put the words not good to make other things our refuge. So the truth is, you have the things that you run to for refuge. I have the things that I run to for refuge. Does taking refuge in God in 2023 seem far off? Does it seem magical? Does it seem like it's a world away? It's in the heavens. It's like umpteen jillion, stars above us. We don't know. Can we take refuge in this, in the justice of God? Can we come to put our refuge only in God? Okay, I'll put my refuge in God, but I also want to watch the Ducks game, and I want to eat some ice cream, and I want to be around people that are friendly to me. I have a lot of things. In fact, I can make a whole group of things and wrap them around me to the point where I never even really have to look at God. And yet, David says here, and we see it many other places, trust only in the refuge of God. Is the refuge of God worthy of being the only thing that we really trust in? I don't trust in Rocky Road ice cream. That's a delusion to me. That's a diversion. What? It's going to melt. It's going to make me fat. It's going to do all kinds of things. And so do all of the things that I think we tend to put as our refuge. How do you make God your refuge? Well, like I've said before, you can't go down to Walmart and buy a case of submission to God. Otherwise, we could do it, and it'd be great, wouldn't it? But to my way of thinking, you need to pray. You seek God and you say, please teach me your ways. We see this in Psalm 139. Lord, look at me. See if there's some untoward things in me. See if there's some ways in which I am not looking toward you. And you, God, lead me in the way that is everlasting. Lou.
Then you take the discipline that he gives you. And it may not be easy, it may be hard, and it may hurt.
Okay.
But it will teach you just what you ask.
Right. And if you didn't hear Lou, he says, then you take the medicine that comes from God. And sometimes it's unpleasant. It's painful even. But it's still good. It's still good. It's good, but it hurts. And he teaches you some things. We'll get to this too. So there's a couple of Psalms by anonymous authorship that I ran across. And, this just shows you that there were some devout people in Israel. Psalm 91, this person says, "This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust in him. I trust him, for he will rescue from every trap and protect you from deadly diseases." It's real physical things there. He will cover you with feathers, and he will shelter you with his wings. And then in Psalm 91 says that if you make the Lord your refuge, no harm will overtake you, for he'll give his angels charge concerning you. Oh, there's another piece of that messianic drip. That's what the Satan quoted to Jesus when he tempted him. He said, "Oh, you can do whatever you want, because it doesn't matter, because the angels will come and bear you up." So David, unlike Saul, he trusted God only. On God my salvation and my glory rest, David says in Psalm 62. The rock of my strength, my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times. This is kind of David taking on the role of king of the people of Israel. He's supposed to be shepherding them, right? So he recognizes that he trusts in God, and then he turns to the people and he says, all of you trust God at all times. O people, and pour out your heart before him. Let him know. God is a refuge for us. And then Selah, or Selah. That's that word in the Psalms we see sometimes that nobody knows what it means, but it seems to mean pause. I've come to feel like anytime that I see that word, I go back and read that last little section again, and I'm going, there's something powerful in here that I kind of glanced over. What does it mean? And I do pause. I try to read that again. He's saying something profound. Now, to the point that was made earlier, Jesus reminds us, and this is in John 16, he reminds us that it may not all be perceived as comfortable to seek refuge only in God. This is what Lou was saying. It's not like you're floating and you land on clouds of cotton candy for the rest of your life. Nevertheless, it is a worthy thing to suffer for these purposes. Jesus said, in me you may have peace. In other words, in me I will give you peace. It's not like the world knows peace. In me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. He follows up. Jesus follows up. He says, take heart, even in your trouble, even in your suffering, even in your pain. He says, I have overcome the world. So that's a comforting thought. And it reminds us that God is a perfect refuge. David is not making a mistake in seeking the refuge of God as his only refuge. He's making a worthy and brilliant choice in his life. Psalm 34 is a place where David kind of looks back, maybe even on this very moment in Psalm 7, when he's in trouble. People are wanting to kill him, drag him off like a lion and tear him, render him torn in pieces so that nothing can save him. He's looking back at the time when he prayed for refuge back there, ways back up the way, and he says this, I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant. And he's referring to the people of Israel, the believers, the people of God. He says, yeah, they saw what God was doing here, and you could see it in their face. It was a radiance that was there. Their faces will never be ashamed. This poor man, and I think he's speaking of himself, he says, this poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and he saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamped around those who fear him, and he rescues them Oh, taste and see. Try it and see that the Lord is good, and that if you take away your submission to all of the things of refuge that you have around you and put them only in God, He will show that He is good. Will He show you that it feels good all the time? No, but that doesn't matter at some point, because you can learn to find joy, a joy that surpasses other things, even in suffering. So how blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. And again in Psalm 31, in you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be ashamed. Incline your ear to me and rescue me quickly. Be a rock of strength to me, a stronghold to save me. You are my rock and my fortress. For your name's sake, you will lead me and guide me. You will pull me out of the net which they have secretly laid for me, for you are my strength. And into your hand I commit my spirit. In your righteousness deliver me. Into your hand I commit my spirit. A little more of the drip of the messianic words that seem to flow through David for some reason. Jesus certainly was aware of these words because he quoted them on the cross. Into thy hands I commit my spirit. Quoting from Deuteronomy, the writer of Hebrews says that God's promises is like this: never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. So here in our back to our text in Psalm 7, and I put Psalm 6 there, I don't know why. It should be Psalm 7. Save me from those who pursue me and deliver me, or he will tear my soul like a lion, dragging me away while there is none to deliver. That's kind of a picture from David's past shepherding days. It's imagery that he understood. It's the way that he kind of I guess we all can put our own experience in our own words as to how we see God. David described it as the danger was like a lion tearing. And for David, I think it was more like this. He's being pursued. And death is a real possibility. Death is a probability. He sees it out there in the false accusations that are being made about him. And even his friends were turning against him and begging to be allowed to be the one to go and kill David. But there's several places where Saul was going after to kill David. There's one here in 1 Samuel 19. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order that they might put him to death in the morning. So they're kind of spying. They're figuring out his routes and when he gets up in the morning and where is he going to go out and wash. We'll kill him then. They're figuring that out. David sees this. He knows that they're plotting against him. And it feels at times like he's already dead. I'm already dead. I'm like a forgotten dead man, out of mind. I'm like a broken vessel. For I've heard the slander of many. Terror is on every side. While they took counsel together against me, they schemed to take away my life. But as for me, I'll trust in you, Lord. O Lord, I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. My times are in your hand means, okay, if I die, that's fine. Or if I live, that's fine. These are your decisions, God. I acquiesce to your decisions in these matters. My times are in your hand. Deliver me, but he still wants to be delivered. He says, deliver me from the hands of my enemies and those who persecute me. Make your face to shine upon your servant. Save me in your loving kindness. How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you've wrought for those who take refuge in you before the sins of men. My thought in the blue part at the bottom, this is sort of my skeptical side comes out. I'm like thinking, well, couldn't David, couldn't he have just made his gates a little stronger or beefed up his security or taken a long trip and gone up to the mountains until things cooled off? Couldn't he have mustered an army? He had a bunch of guys around him. He had 400 or 500 people that were his warriors. He had mighty men that began to be attached to him that could do they were like SWAT teams, you know. They could take care of almost anything. Couldn't he have done all this? And why does he have to beg God to be his refuge, be his salvation, be the place the only place I'm going to go? I think David probably did some of this stuff. We know that he went and hid in a cave one time. We know that he went out into the desert trying to escape from Saul a few times. So he took action, and he did have mighty men. He did have an army. He didn't just throw himself at the foot of Saul and say, kill me. He was active, but he knew that no matter what, it's like Lauren up in Alaska, one of the great Christian men up in the Valley Church of Christ up in Wasilla, Alaska. And he said, because he's like 98 now, he has gone for 6 months every year to Thailand as a missionary, or Cambodia. And his health is sort of failing, and he got to where he couldn't walk, so he decided that he would have a knee replacement. So he did that. And people were saying, well, Lauren, why are you having your knee replaced? You're 95, and you've got to, at some point, you need to figure out that you can't keep going to Cambodia for 6 months every year. They relax, retire, kind of a thing. And Lauren says, well, I'm just going to make the best of this. If the Lord wants to take me, nothing can stop me from dying. But if the Lord wants to preserve me for his service, nothing can take me down. I'm just going to do my part and give him that option. So that's kind of what David does. I think he acts. It's like Teilhard de Chardin, who was like a philosopher, said, and I don't agree with about 80% of what he said, but he said this one thing one time that stuck in my mind. He said, we as men set the rudder of the ship, but it is God that propels us toward the open sea. The power of God that moves us. All we do is set the rudder so that the ship doesn't spin in a circle. We have some act that we can do, but far more powerful is the refuge we find in God. So back to Psalm 7. Let's sort of maybe finish kind of like with this thought here, because this is the moment where we see the actual accusations that Cush is making against David. O Lord, my God, if I have done this, if there is injustice in my hands, if I have rewarded evil to my friend, or have plundered him, who without cause was my adversary, let the enemy pursue my soul and overtake it. Let him trample my life down to the ground and lay my glory in the dust. There's another Selah. That's a good place to stop. I'd go back, read that 4 times. So David here, he feels like he is complete in God. His faith in God gives him some kind of completeness. Is he sinless? Of course not. None of us are sinless. We are birthed upon a sinful world, a world that is full of sin and death. David believes he's innocent. And he also believes that he's blameless. All right, think of these words in red over to the right. He is complete, he is innocent, and he is blameless. That's the way Job thought of himself too. And Paul thought of himself that way. Innocent, complete, because I'm trusting in God, gives me a completeness that I can't get anywhere else. And he's blameless. Is he sinless? No. He still makes mistakes, but the thing about him is when he sees that he makes this mistake, he repents, he turns back to God. And that gives him this completeness, this innocence, this blamelessness. Far from the accusations that are being made here, which is, if I put it in my own words, you take things from people that were always nice to you. People have been trying to be friends with you, and then you steal their stuff. They try to be warm to you, and then you turn around and you try to hurt them. And David, he knows what the accusations are, that he's unjust, that he paid back people that were trying to be good to him. He gave them evil in return, and he stole stuff from them. He took things from them that were not his own, and he had no cause to doing that because they had been good to him. And then David says, no. David's not willing to accept that accusation as true. He's willing to face trial, and he says to God, bring me forward. If you find me unjust in this, if there is iniquity in me, let me be trampled to the ground. Let me go down to the grave, which is what the people of Cush want to do. And Saul, of course, pursued David from Gibeah, one time to En-Gedi, which is down on the Dead Sea. It's only 48 miles from Gibeah, but he brought 3,000 men with him when he went down there. And it was at this place that David camped out up in En-Gedi, and there's water there. It's a beautiful spot. In fact, probably not a good time to go visit over there. But they made this a national park, and there's up in these wadis or these crevices, and this one is like one of the biggest ones. There's water, and it's beautiful up in there, but most of it looks like this. That's where David ran to En-Gedi. If you follow those trees at the bottom and you go way back up in there, you might find that pool of water. But most of it looks like this. And there's caves in the walls. That's places where they hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, we talked about. That's right down there on the Dead Sea. But David doesn't kill Saul. He doesn't repay him evil for good. He repays them with mercy. David spares Saul's life at En-Gedi. far from the accusations of taking things from a friend for no cause, far from returning evil to one who had only done good to him. Saul's not trying to do good. Saul went out there with 3,000 men to kill David. Why? No reason, no real reason, no cause. It is Saul who is repaying evil for David's good. This was not who David was. He knew that he was not that kind of a person. And in another place, Saul was camped down on the plain, and all the people were asleep. And in the middle of the night, David and Abishai, they went down there and crept among the soldiers who were hiding, resting, getting ready to attack David and try to kill him again. This was another incident. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hand. Now therefore, please, David, please." By the way, you remember this story when you read in 1 Samuel 26, that it's mentioned in there that if there's thousands of soldiers out here sleeping, why didn't one of them wake up and say, "Hey, wait a minute, David's over there. He's coming, he's sneaking up to you. Somebody protect the king." Nobody did. Why? Well, it says in the scripture, just in passing, and God made a deep sleep to fall upon them all. So Abishai says, "Please let me strike him with a spear to the ground. I will just pin him to the ground with one stroke, and I will not have to strike him a second time." What a great opportunity, not to repay evil for good, but maybe repay evil for evil, But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be without guilt?" David also said, "As the Lord lives, surely the Lord will strike him." David knew he was going to be king, and he was just waiting his time. As the Lord lives, surely the Lord will strike him, or his day will come that he dies, or he will go down in a battle, he'll perish. The Lord forbid that I should be to stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed, but now please take this spear. We will take his spear and the jug of water there, take that, and let's go. So David took the spear and the jug of water from beside Saul's head, and they went away, but no one saw or knew it, nor did any awake, for they were all asleep, because a sound sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. So the point is that David was so far from being guilty of these slanderous charges. He knew himself to be innocent. At least twice, out of who he was, he had preserved Saul's life, even though Saul, for no reason, was trying to kill him. And so David knew that he was innocent, certainly not sinless. And I think that's something for us to ponder in our lives, that we are saved by the blood of Christ, yet we live as sinful people. It's not like Saul said, well, does that mean we should sin some more just so that God's grace may abound? No, we don't do that. But when we see ourselves doing things that we ought not to be doing, and we know that it's not, we turn. And when we turn, that is something God loves. He sees that turning. And so for David, he wasn't sinless. He was cast into a sinful world, but he did see himself complete in faithfulness to God. And we're out of time, Lou, but we'll give you the last word today.
or doing, not doing good, but you know you can do.
Right. So what Lou is saying is, it's not just a question of not doing something that you ought not to do, but it's like choosing to avoid things that you ought to do. Both of those things are part of a completeness and faithfulness in God. Thank you all. We'll pick up here next week. Thank you for telling me that, because that's an encouragement to me.